You have any fricked up family secrets? Here's mine. Found out at 18 that my mom is an illegitimate child. My maternal grandfather is not biologically related. For years I would look at my yearbook pictures and find it puzzling that in most photos, I looked exactly like this kid in my class. The resemblance was uncanny. Turned out that he was my illegitimate half-uncle. My grandmother let that secret slip once when she was drunk. She'll never admit to it while my grandfather is still alive. My mother was adopted. She found her biological family later in life. She then extorted them for as much money as possible before they cut all contact with her and by extension me. I have no idea what kind of messed up lies she told about me for sympathy and or more money. She has stolen money from everyone in my family including me. She is an alcoholic, lying waste of life, and the world will be much better when she finally dies from lung disease, heart and liver failure. She beat me as a child. That escalated quickly. My cousin committed a multiple murder of a couple with a rifle in front of their baby. Then he stole their car. Life in prison. My mom kept it from me until I was older, obviously. Also, not really a secret, but my grandma swears that her brother had an affair with the girl on the Sun-Made Raisins box. I don't have any proof for you, but I believe her. I looked it up and she's a real person who lived where he was living while he was in the army Fresno. And there's a few appropriately aged kids with his and my last name living in the area. My last name is not common at all. Not proud of the first one, proud of the second. My grandparents live in the Middle East. They used to have a child slave. Basically an impoverished family sent their then 12-year-old daughter to live with my grandparents to work as a maid. She worked day and night and waited on my grandmother. She was being paid for her work, but not to her personally, but to her parents for safekeeping for when she is older. She didn't go to school and could barely read or write. I never realized how fricked up this was until many years later. I was 6 at the time. I am 21 now. I've spoken out against it to my mother and grandparents now, but this is many years after the fact, and I am told to keep quiet about it because people will misunderstand. So yeah, that's my fricked up family secret. Great uncle killed himself after getting the Hispanic maid pregnant. At least it wasn't the Argonian maid. My uncle was a very high up sannyasi for the Hare Krishna. As a result, he spent 30+ years living in India. He would do tons of charitable work, and even though we have different religious views, I respect him immensely for all the good he did in the world. He passed away around 6 or 7 years ago, and in his will, he left over $9,000 to one of his favorite underfunded schools in India. My aunt, his sister, was named one of the co-executors of his will. The other executor was one of his disciples. After his death, she forged the signature of his disciple, withdrew the $9,000 and used it on a holiday for herself, my grandmother, and my cousin. They stayed at 5-star hotels and went out every night. The kids in India went without anything. It disgusts me. My family is, all of a sudden, sane and picturesque. My skeletons in the closet look like a dozen roses on a bed of grass. My family is either freaking boring or very good at keeping secrets. Like any family, mine's got some crap, but I think the most screwed up thing was how my sister treated me when we were younger. She used to frick with me, psychologically. I was like 5, and she would suddenly start acting different, and telling me that I wasn't real, that I had died during an accident years ago, that our parents were dead and I hadn't been able to cope with it, so I just imagined they were still alive. As an incredibly impressionable youngster, these sessions always drove me to tears, and always occurred when my parents would be out for most of the night, leaving me alone in the house with her for hours on end. Once I got older and understood she was just a bee, she stopped. I don't think there were any long-term effects from it, but I can still remember one time when she just stared at me with these cold, unfeeling eyes and told me I wasn't real. I felt sick and just started sobbing, and she just kept staring at me. As I cried, she turned out the light in my room and locked me in, telling me to think about what she told me. That is some seriously fricked crap. Your sister needs therapy. You probably do too. It can't possibly hurt. Everyone could benefit from some therapy, but some people need it. My father's stepdad murdered 5 people in front of him. I had to teach him to write spell read. My dad's a fan of affairs. My sister thinks that's talking to my dad after I get home from the hospital about how she wishes I would kill myself to make her life easier is a good idea. Facebook never keeps information. I covered my father's pee addiction to people I know by claiming it was mine and I was interested in sex and sexuality. I sold in-game currencies to Asian gold sellers to help my mom out of debt. She doesn't even know this in its entirety. I sold in-game currencies to Asian gold sellers to help my mom out of debt. She doesn't even know this in its entirety. AMC's Breaking Chaotic Good. Welcome to the small town soap opera behind my middle name. My middle name is David. I was named after my father's mentor. My mother later had an affair with my father's mentor. I have no idea if this happened before or after my parents' divorce. David was definitely still married though. My mother later married an entirely new guy, my stepdad. My stepdad had an affair with the mother of one of my classmates. During my junior year in high school, my mom and stepdad got divorced. My stepdad married that woman. That woman is David's daughter. Oh, and David and my father, both ministers. Everyone in my family, including myself, is a pathological, compulsive liar. Wait a second. Not my family, best friend's family, lived with them for a while after leaving home during HS. Mom, J, had been an illegal immigrant who came over with nothing to her name, worked 2 jobs under the table to send money home to the family. She meets Dad, S. They marry, he's happy, she's not. Once she has her citizenship she works 2 jobs above board to pay for their son. Saves up $50K over the years as a nest egg for his college education. S has a midlife crisis and leaves his family to go to Hollywood to make it as an actor. While there he spends the $50K nest egg and gets another $30K in debt. Begs J for forgiveness and she forgives, because Jesus. He cheats on her a few times for good measure. I think the guy is freaking scum. The mom's something of a son. Best friend did end up going to college, to put a happy spin on it. One time I left the Atari on and it burned an image of asteroids into the television screen and my father yelled at me. I did the same thing except with a pause menu from Need for Speed. Dad was a cook, mom was a prostitute. Spent various times of my youth homeless and doing drugs, often with mom. I'm now almost done with my PhD. Congratulations on your PhD work. I don't know you, but I am proud of you. My dad's side of the family is freaking crazy. They're all from Poland and I've never met any of these people. The grandfather guy head of the family had a fake leg and he used to smuggle money into Poland when it was a communist country and desperately poor. The government found out about this and executed him in a public square. He would smuggle the cash in his wooden leg. He had money because he was living in America and owned a farm. But what he would do is go to Poland and find young men and convince them that he'll pay their way to America. They give him basically everything they have. He lets them live at his farm. They work for him until their debt is paid off. Kind of like indentured servitude. But what he used to do was murder these men after some time when they thought their debt was paid. He would do it with a cane that had a brass knob, just blindside them and bludgeon them to death. Then have my father and uncle dig graves and bury the bodies. Then he would just go back to Poland and find more people. Rinse and repeat. I don't know whatever happened of it all, but this all happened in the 40s. Also my mother's side of the family were all Nazis. Both her parents were in Hitler youth camps from childhood and then they served as nurses or fought or did whatever for the Nazi party. There is a strong sentiment of racism with all of them. The older ones that is. Mainly due to the fact that they were indoctrinated with racist crap from childhood in Nazi summer camps. You know your family has a fricked up history when you remember the Nazis as an afterthought. My grandfather and one of my uncles murdered their son brother because the poor bastard was addicted to drugs and his addiction was giving a bad name to the family. My grandmother has turned the blind eye and pretends she knows nothing about it. This is only known because my grandfather got drunk 15 years later and was somewhat bragging about protecting the honor of the family. My great-great-great-grandmother was a cleaner at the Swedish king's mansion and had an affair with him. I am of royal blood and I'm not allowed to tell anyone. I am of royal blood and I'm not allowed to tell anyone. Your secret's safe with us, your highness. My great-grandfather shot my great-grandmother in the head in front of my infant grandmother and her older sister. For years we were told it's stranger that walked in and did it, with no reason behind it happening. No one told us the truth until my grandmother and her sister died. Not so secret in my family, but here goes. Grandmother used to own a strip club with prostitutes in the back. She was essentially a madam. Grandmother's brother killed 3 guys one night, and a dog, and has been on death row for the past 30 years or so. Same grandmother had my father when she was 14. Same grandmother's sister attempted to light her trailer on fire with her 4 kids and boyfriend sleeping inside. Went to prison for a little while for arson and attempted murder. Grandmother's 2 other brothers traded wives and they ended up living in 2 trailers side by side raising all 10 kids communally. In hindsight, all my crazy crap's just one side of the family. Bro, I got nothing to compete with that. Your families are a mess. Yet, here we are, alive and well. How each of us survived is rather amazing. After reading a bunch of these, I can happily say that I have nothing to contribute. My dad beat up my brother when he was young. He also has beat my mother. My mother feels that this wasn't really physical abuse. My dad once attempted to strangle me. My parents hate each other. My half-brother attempted suicide twice as a teenager. My half-brother's dad visited him in the hospital after an attempt and informed him that he wanted nothing to do with him. Soon after was the second attempt. My father's family hates my mother. One of my mum's cousins ran away from home at 15 to live with a 50-year-old. On Christmas Day, my cousin bought an axe and was convinced he was gonna murder him mum. My granddad married his brother's widow. Another one of my mum's cousins fled rehab, which he was in for abuse. My dad recently told me about my uncle and his wife. They met in their early 20s. Their kids all pretty much look a lot like him. However, my dad mentioned something I didn't know. His wife once dated a, now deceased, cousin of mine. He was in his mid-teens and she was in her early 20s when it happened. My family all spent a lot of time at my grandparents at this time, and my uncle and his wife lived with her as well when they just got married. My dad says one time my grandma was doing laundry and heard something in the basement. She goes in and sees her new daughter-in-law in bed with said cousin. My uncle never found out. My dad claims a few people in the family have speculated that my cousin was the father of their first son. Hard to tell though cause they all look alike. The cousin I mentioned has his own sad story. I mentioned he's deceased. He died in a car crash after drinking at a party 2 weeks after turning 22. His car crashed, rolled, and he and his friend died instantly. Don't let your friends drink and drive, guys. My aunt, his mom, is a nurse who teaches at a trade school. A former student of hers told us that my aunt has a different story about how he died. She says he was a paramedic who died on the job, killed by a drunk driver. It's sad. I believe it. She kind went into a deep 3-year depression after his death that really messed up their family. Her second oldest is in jail. Her other 2 kids have issues as well. My cousin was a good guy. He had problems, always getting into trouble, and he was changing his bad ways at the time. But it's sad that his mom doesn't want to deal with the truth. Sadly, his dad died some months later. He was diabetic. Cousin's death just took a toll on him, and our grandpa passed that winter too. But at least my grandpa lived a long life. My family would meet up every Saturday evening. When we arrived, my cousins would start tormenting me, egged on by his mum and my grandparents. When I used to start crying because it got too much, I would get yelled at and my mum would scream at me for being immature, being stupid, that I shouldn't cry because nothing bad was going on. I would be beaten up every weekend. My grandparents would laugh at me and I would be left covered in bruises. I have a nice scar on my right arm from when I was really young from them using glass. I used to get told they wished I wasn't around. My aunt used to say she was glad she never had a girl. It turns out, a lot of the crap was because I was a girl. My family hates girls and I was the only girl. I don't know anything about how my mum and dad met. She won't tell me. I can't ask him because he died before I was born. They were married, but my dad had another family before her. My mum kept my family hidden from me until I was 18 and about to take my A-levels. I think he left his family for her, but I don't know. She told me they would never want me, just like everyone else. I haven't found my brother yet. My mum would buy me stuff every weekend to keep me quiet about the stuff that happened at home. The yelling, when she hit me for stupid reasons. She would also buy me things to keep me quiet if she did something really bad. Happened quite often. I did try and tell people, but they didn't listen, didn't understand or care. I'm not this huge freak everyone thinks I am. My family spread rumors about me, horrible things that no one would ever tell me. I never found out what they were saying about me, but everyone believed them. I'm just a little strange from having no real social interaction until I was 18. My cousin's dad ran out on them after stealing as many family valuables as possible and nearly getting my uncle arrested. He pretty much ran out when he found out my aunt was pregnant again. Oh, you mean the country where IKEA and PewDiePie is from #feature me.